Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, the happy children in the back, have a seat. Good morning. Welcome to the Auburn Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We're located on occupied ancestral land of the Muscogee Nation and in and housed in a building constructed by free, formerly enslaved African Americans. My name is Laura Clover. I'm your service associate today. We welcome you. We know you come here for different reasons: to find community, to seek your spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort and perhaps find the answers to some of your bigger questions. We welcome you. We know you come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, and different backgrounds. We hope you will find comfort, connection, challenge, and love here. We hope you will find ways to provide outreach to others in our congregation, in our local community, and our world community. Let me see if there's announcements on the back of the order of service. I don't see them. But sometimes you'll find some there. Anyway, please read them when they are there.
They're there.
For important information.
They're there.
They are? Oh, we got new ones since I last printed mine, so. Yeah, anyway. And following the service, we'll have spoken announcements. On behalf of the members of this fellowship, I extend a special welcome to all visitors who are joining us for the first time, and to those of you who still feel like visitors, and to returning members. If you have not already done so, please fill out our visitor book at the front near the greeters, or digitally by visiting auuf.org/visitor. You may also contact our minister, Reverend Chris Rothbauer, at minister@auuf.org with any questions or concerns that you may have. As we prepare for our service this morning, please remember to turn your phone and other electronic devices to silent. Let us move into the service willing to be authentic with each other, honest with ourselves, and open to the connection in all its forms.
Our opening words this morning are from Lawrence E. Magenti. To this house we come, bringing our boldest dreams, seeking here the inspiration and strength to make them be. To this house we come hoping to bury broken dreams, to be sustained through pain, and to discover new ones amidst their tears. We come here lonely, isolated from meaningful human contact, searching for warmth and closeness and care, needing to grow beyond plateaus of the commonplace. We seek here challenges and commitments productive of greater wholeness and deeper meanings. We come intense and constructed, hoping for encouragement to shed our pretenses and be ourselves. Filled with despair and self-doubt, we seek affirmations, prodding us to say yes to ourselves and to life. Somehow, always putting happiness ahead of ourselves, we enter this place trusting that what happens here will enable us to make and to accept a little bit of it now, today. Strange place, this house. Here we cry, sing, laugh, hurt, touch, survive, celebrate, grow, search, doubt, hope, rejoice, pray, trust, care, learn, think, wonder, be, become. Yes, this morning, to this house we come.
lovely. We light our chalice this morning with these words from Sarah Eileen Lawal. Out of the flames of fear, we rise with courage of our deepest convictions to stand for justice, inclusion, and peace. Out of the flames of scrutiny, we rise to proclaim our faith. We hope to heal a fractured and hurting world. Out of the flames of doubt, we rise to embrace the mystery, wonder, and awe of all there is and all that is yet to be. Out of the flame of hate, we rise with the force of love, love that celebrates our shared humanity. Out of the flame, we rise. As is our tradition, we also light a candle in solidarity with those families separated at our southern border. Our opening hymn is number 311 in the great hymnal, Let It Be a Dance. That was a different version. One of the ways that we proclaim the warmth and caring of our community is by sharing our joys, concerns, and milestones. If you are joining us virtually, we invite you to type your joy, concern, or milestone into the YouTube chat box during the music for meditation. We invite those in person to, one at a time, drop a pebble into our communal bowl during the music for meditation. Spoken joys and concerns will be invited following the music.
I can say something. It wasn't just this, sorry. I'm just using chairs in my home.
Okay. There'll be a little music, but you may still come up in the silence and drop a joy or concern or a milestone stone.
So she's going to call for it afterwards. If you have a joy, concern, or milestone, to come forward one at a time and briefly share it into the microphone. Sure it's on. To help maintain social distancing, please don't line up, but come forward after the last person has left the microphone.
I have a joy. My dear friends and dear friends of many of you here, Lou Stan and Jim Gregoire are visiting for a few days.
We had a little excitement at the house this morning. First, Richard's cat brought a chipmunk in and let go. The chipmunk is now in the bathroom where I literally will get back. And then, meanwhile, a bird came in. So we got a bird and a chipmunk in the house. Very exciting.
It's an animal shelter now, right?
Good morning. I would like to share my joy at being here with you all and the joy that my parents on Monday celebrated 68 years of marriage.
Well, I have a joy because I got to have a marvelous visit with my niece, who's 53, and I haven't seen her in 25 years. Together, we had shared with my son Nils and his girlfriend Sydney, and Jim and Lou and Ralph and Eric and Julie, of course, a really fabulous fun time all around the table together. It was great.
Those of you who remember the marvelous fundraiser that we had back in the fall may recall that I volunteered to take some people out to see my horses, and Jan was going to also do a mushroom walk. And it's been hot, and there have been no mushrooms, and it's been much too hot to bring anybody out after church. But this week, the last 2 days, we've had just the perfect conditions for mushrooms. There's all kinds of fungi that have popped up on the property, and it's 18 acres with the woods. So I'm just going to say this is not the official fulfillment as promised, but if anyone is interested and would like to do a quick casual tour at my place after church, I'd be glad to show you around. There's the most amazing fungi coming up in the yard, like 10 different varieties, things I've never seen before. Y'all are welcome.
Ma'am, Chris, everybody. This is sort of a follow-up to 2 weeks ago when we did the water communion. On a Wednesday last week, I and some other residents of the city of Auburn had a chance to go to the Citizens Academy that's going to wrap up next month. And we went, among other places, to Lake Ogletree, and we learned a little bit about water research management and how to better take care of the water, from the storm water to regular water and to all of that. So just be aware that the city wants us to better take care of the water that we use.
And we have a joy that our good friends, Karine Bandine and Victor Diaz and their 3 kids, 2 kids are here, 2 of their 3 kids are here visiting for about 10 days from New York City. So we're having a lot of fun reuniting with them.
Thank you to all who shared their joys, concerns, and milestones this morning. These joys, we don't have any joys, sorry. May all the joys and concerns and milestones of this community, those shared aloud and those held in silence, be received into the care and concern of all present. Our moment for all ages today is led by our coordinator of religious exploration, Angela Farmer, and welcome back, Angela.
Thank you. If all my friends who would like to come up for the stories would come up. I'm going to be reading through 2 masks today, so I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me okay? Through my mask. Edward gets messy. This is Edward. That died. I'll be louder. This is Edward. Edward is a very particular pig. Thank you. He fears filth. He detests dirt. He likes things to be just so. Edward never gets messy. Each morning before school, Edward irons his perfectly clean clothes. He tidies his perfectly tidy room until there's not a speck of dust in sight. I must have crossed my PowerPoints there. He vacuums his perfectly sparkling goldfish tank with a special underwater vacuum. Edward is very happy with being clean, but it's hard work to stay that way. Edward never pets friendly dogs on the street. He never ever eats food that spills or splatters. And he never, ever, ever uses markers or glues or sticks of paint. They're just too messy.
It sure isn't easy being a particular pig. On the way to school one morning, Edward's friends jumped in a big pile of dirty leaves. But Edward doesn't get messy, he walks on the sidewalk. In Edward's science class, the baking soda volcano erupts into a spraying flow. But Edward doesn't get messy, he sits in the back of the room. At lunchtime, everyone else at Edward's table eats spaghetti and meatballs. But Edward doesn't get messy, he eats a plate of steamed broccoli. Maybe about that. There's nothing wrong with broccoli, you're right. On the muddy field outside, Edward's classmates play a game of baseball. But Edward doesn't get messy. He stays in the stands. Edward has stayed clean for most of the day. Now there's just one class left. The art teacher gives out paper and paint.
Does it need to carry on the table covered up like that?
Once again, Edward doesn't get messy. He straightens up the supply shelf. If something goes wrong, plop. Oh dear. Oh dear. To his surprise and his horror, and through no fault of his own, Edward gets messy. Edward is distraught. Edward is devastated. Edward doesn't know what to do. But wait. Have a good idea?
Clean the fungus that's growing on it.
This is like algae, maybe. The next day at school, Edward helps the science teacher with her experiment. Out on the muddy baseball field, Edward gets hit and slides into second base. And on the way home from school, he jumps into that big pile of leaves. Edward is no longer afraid to pet friendly dogs on the street or eat food that spills and splatters. And he happily uses markers and glue sticks and especially paint, because now Edward knows that it's okay, even for a particular pig, to get messy. After all, they can always clean up afterward. The end.
May your hearts of love and your friends with justice as you go your way in peace. As you go your way in peace. As you go your way in peace.
Please join me in the spirit of contemplation in whatever way feels right with these words from Beth Lefevre. We are whole, even in the broken places where it hurts. We are whole, even in the broken places where the fear impedes our full engagement with life, where self-doubt corrupts our self-love, where shame makes our faces hot and our souls cold. We are whole, even in these places where perfectionism blunts the joy of full immersion into person, place, activity, where good enough does not reside except in silent longings, where our gaps must be fast filled with substance, accomplishment, or frenzied activity, lest they gape open in disgust. We are whole, where we would doubt our own goodness, richness, fullness, and depth, where we would doubt our own significance, our own profoundness. We are whole even in our fragility, even where we feel fragmented alone, insubstantial, insufficient. We are whole, even as we are in process, even as we stumble, even as we pick ourselves up again. For we are whole, we are whole. Blessed be.
The light of our chalice would soon flicker and die without the oil that nourishes its flame. And just as this flame cannot burn without oil, this religious community cannot survive or thrive without the financial as well as the personal support of its members and friends. The oil that keeps the flame of our liberal religious faith alive and fuels the shared mission of ministry of this fellowship. Let us now give freely and generously in offerings to sustain and strengthen our shared religious community, a community of memory, hope, faith, and love. For we are now the keepers of its flame that burns for justice, its dream of beloved community, its vision of a world made whole. To make a donation via PayPal, please visit auf.org/donate. Please indicate in the notes whether your donation is for your pledge or for the offering. If you are writing a check, please make your check payable to AUF with a note on the memo line about whether it is for the offering or your pledge. And then drop it in the offering bowl or mail it to P.O. Box 669, Auburn, Alabama 36831. The offering will now be gratefully received. This is a reading from Kate R. Walker. In between. In between liminal, that space where we wait, between moments, events, results, action, no action. To stand on the threshold waiting for something to end, and something new to arrive. Pause in the rumble of time. Awareness claims us, alert, the shadow of something different. In between invitation and acceptance, in between symptom and diagnosis, in between send and receipt of inquiry and question, in between love given and love received. Liminality, a letting go, entering into confusion, ambiguity, and disorientation. A ritual begun. Pause, look back at what once was. Look forward into what becomes. Identity sheds a layer, reaches into something uncomfortable to wear. In between lighting of the match and the kindling of oil, in between choosing of text and the reading of words, in between voices and notes carried through the air into ears to hear, in between creation thrusts ever forward. Social hierarchies may disassemble and structures may fall. Communities may revolt or tempt trust. Tradition may falter or creativity crashes forward. Leaders may step down or take charge. The people may choose or refuse. In between, storm predicted, horizon beckons. In between, theology of process reminds us to step back. In between, minutiae and galaxies intermingle with microbes and mysteries. In between, liminal, that space where we wait, look, listen, feel, breathe.
Some of you who are in covenant groups with me might have heard this story this week, so if you're hearing it again and you're tired of hearing it, my apologies. But whenever I think about paradox, I think back to when I was a kid. And I remember there was one weekend in my little hometown in southern Indiana that my parents told me we were going to go to the mall. I couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 at the time. I know I was really young. But I remember being really fascinated. What is this thing called a mall? And so we drove about 10 minutes and we arrived at the Green Tree Mall ports. Parked in the parking lot and started going through various stores. The bookstore, the toy store, and the department store. I think in those days there was even a Walgreens in it. We went through all these places and we bought quite a bit on that trip. But I remember being really confused and looking at my parents and saying, we've been to all these stores, but I thought you said we were going to the mall. when do we get to the mall? You see, my young brain had not yet learned that sometimes things are contained within other things, that sometimes things can't exist without something else, and sometimes things are contradictory. That you could be at both the mall and the bookstore at the same time because the mall was within the bookstore. But I remember the answer I finally came to within my own brain at that age was that the little hallways that we walked in between the stores, that must be the mall because they weren't anything else. And so it began that for a while after that, I thought of mall as being the in-between places between all the stores. It took me a long, long time after that, maybe a few more years, before I finally was able to grasp the concept of a mall. But I think back to that story with a little bit of smiling at my own young mistake, as well as thinking there's some profound wisdom in that. The reading that Laura just read about the in-between places, I think perfectly sums up where paradox often meets our everyday life. When I went to General Assembly in Portland this year, I was struck by the number of times that Susan Frederick Gray and others used the word liminal in their speeches. That's a word that I had never heard before I went to seminary, I must confess. But liminal is a kind of theological way of saying you're in an in-between place. Congregations sometimes go through liminal times when a minister leaves and a new minister hasn't arrived yet, or when they've reached a new size level of membership, or find themselves deciding, as many of our congregations are right now, whether it's time to close. But it's an interesting thing, I think, when you think about it. Because these in-between places are most obvious when they're turning our world upside down. But what if they're there a lot more often than that? The philosophy blog Eternalized says that every human experience can be expressed in terms of a paradox. Day is comprehensible only in contrast to night. Masculinity has relevance only in contrast to femininity. Activity has meaning only in relation to rest. Up is only possible in the presence of down. And where would I be without you? It seems that for everything, you can find a paradox or something that contradicts it. There's a lot of cliche paradoxes you might have heard over the years, like, for instance, the more often you fail, the more chance you have to succeed in the end. I'm not sure that one's always true. Or you might have been unhappily single and wondering why Mr. or Mrs. or Mix Right wasn't coming along, and someone told you you needed to quit looking for love and it would find you. Although there's some truth in that, it's probably not the best advice to give someone who's suffering heartbreak in the moment. I think life is full of paradoxes because language, the tool that we use to try to understand the world, is an imperfect one. And so it, by its very nature, creates paradox. We can talk about things that don't exist or couldn't possibly exist even if they're real. For instance, there's an old theological and philosophical paradox that I thought was a little ridiculous, even back in the days when I was an evangelical. It asked, can an omnipotent or an all-powerful God create a rock that even they can't lift? If they're all-powerful, they can do anything, but if they can do anything, could they create something even they can't do? If that makes your brain turn a little bit trying to figure out what it could possibly mean, it's for good reason. It's an example of language creating a situation that couldn't possibly come to be a paradox. Most of the time, our minds are able to filter out paradoxes. There are multiple paradoxes going on in this room right now that we're not even aware of, because it would take up too much of our time and energy to notice every single one. We need to be able to ignore paradox in order to function in our everyday lives. Let me give you an example. The old laws of mechanics tell me that when I'm speaking, there is an infinite amount of time, as I understand it, that it takes my words to reach you, and yet your ears still eventually hear the words. There's a paradox in that. There's a paradox because, well, our language is imperfect. And paradoxes often expose errors in thinking or things that are missing in our lives. The British author Douglas Adams once said that if the universe came to an end every time there is some uncertainty about what had happened in it, it would have never got beyond the first picosecond. And he goes on to say many, of course, don't. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world that's often expressed through paradox and ambiguity. An example of this that one writer describes is the example of disenfranchised grief. If you're not familiar with this concept, when we grieve something that we're told that we ethically or morally or culturally shouldn't, it often gets pushed down into disenfranchised grief. Classic examples include an abusive partner or parent, or grieving our animals. How many times have you been told that you shouldn't be grieving? It's just an animal. And yet we do grieve because they're important to us. Currently, there's a lot of speculation that we're all going through disenfranchised grief right now. COVID-19 upended our world in an extremely short amount of time. And for many of us, we haven't had time to even stop and process. What if we're all dealing with these paradoxes of what is normal, what is safe, what is even the right way to go forward, if there is such thing as a right way? I think it's sufficient to say that we need ways to deal with paradox when our minds can't suppress them. Brene Brown once said that we are complex beings who wake up each day and fight against being labeled and diminished with stereotypes and characterizations that don't reflect our fullness, yet we don't risk standing on our own and speaking out. Paradoxes can prevent us from living in the fullness of life by perpetuating our own disconnection. For example, Was anyone here ever told as a kid, don't be nicer, don't be so angry or sad or whatever it is? If you were ever told that, I saw a couple of hands in the back. If you learn that it's bad to be angry or sad, the natural thing to do is to suppress that. But what about when you need angry and sadness? There are things in this world you should be angry about. And there are things that are going to happen that I would worry about you if you're not sad. Wholeness is found by learning to live with this paradox and finding ways of bringing wholeness to our lives. But the paradox of paradox is, what if the way to deal with paradox is to run towards it rather than away from it? The Eternalized Blogs continues that paradox is that water of life we need so badly in our modern world. Paradox can be creative, helping us to see the world in new ways. One of the examples of this is actually found in the religious realm. If you're familiar at all with Zen Buddhism, you might be aware that there comes a point in Zen training when the master will often give the student a koan to meditate on. Now, koans by their very nature are paradoxical statements that make no sense. The classic one you might have heard is, what is the sound of one hand clapping? You can't answer it because one hand can't clap, although when I told that to Laura the other day, she said, well, what about that? Maybe Laura found a new solution to the koan. The idea of meditating on koans is that you meditate on it till you fully understand it, and then you take the meaning to the teacher, and then they give you a new koan. But the idea is to expand your ways of thinking, to help you think and break those patterns of thinking that language has created within you. A person's able to see the world differently because they're able to think about the world differently just by thinking about paradox. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung believed that we're all a bundle of paradoxes. He called it our shadow, because what happens when we start repressing those parts of ourselves we're not supposed to have, like anger? They go down into our shadow, and we forget that they're there. He says everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. At all counts, it forms an unconscious snag, thwarting our most well-meaning intentions. It keeps us, he thought, from fully embracing our lives. And like the koan, he believed that the way to embrace this paradox in our lives was not to run from it, but to run towards it, to embrace it, and to find ways of integrating it into our lives. If you're looking for a formula of how to do this, you'll be sorely disappointed. As Robert Johnson, who was a Jungian analyst in the early days, put it, everyone needs to find their own way of embracing paradox. He was scared to give anyone any directions because he was scared they would turn it into a formula and create more shadows. But suffice it to say, what the Jungians believe is that we need paradox work, which they called inner work, in order to really embrace the fullness of who we are. Jung and his successive analysts believe that through psycho-spiritual practices such as dream work and active imagination, we could bring awareness to the shadow, and we could become more familiar with our own inner life and the things we've repressed. But it's inner work, Johnson would later say, it's more than just a couple of pithy practices. It's anything that puts us on the road to embracing the wholeness of who we are. Johnson believed that meditation, prayer, art, writing, many, many things could bring up those shadow elements, those paradoxical elements that have lied dormant in our unconscious for years. An example of this could be, how do we deal with the anxiety that's come from the COVID emergency and the subsequent political fallout? Well, through inner work, I can come to realize that I'm anxious about the state of the world. And I've been repressing that anxiety because I had to keep going on and finding ways to live. And it's not that that was a wrong choice. I still have to find new ways to live. And if I reject that choice, it too becomes part of the shadow. But it's about finding ways to embrace every part of ourselves. Because I realize that I'm learning to feel my way in a world where no normal is no longer applicable. And what I may need in this moment is ways of finding resilience as I learn to find my own new normal. What are the paradoxes within you right now? Where is that ambiguity that's lying dormant in the unconscious? The interesting thing about living with paradox is Jung believed that if we didn't do this inner work, we'd come up in more unhealthy ways. In fact, writing about this in the aftermath of World War II, Jung was willing to make the bold claim that a lack of doing inner work had led the human species to 2 world wars within 40 years of each other, and towards some of the greatest catastrophes the human race has ever known. One way or another, Jung believed, your shadow will come to light. The question becomes, will it come to light in a way that serves wholeness, or will it come to light in a way that further damages the universe? He had a lot to say about the different ways the shadow was being projected onto the world in his day, from racism to anti-Semitism to war. And I wonder if he was alive today, what he would say about the current political situation in the United States and other Western nations. Now here's another paradox for you. I'm not sure we ever fully get done with this paradox work, because the day we stop is the day we start creating our shadows all over again. In fact, if you read some of Jung's work today, some of it seems pretty racist and anti-Semitic. You could use the excuse that he was a product of his time, but that doesn't make it any less racist and anti-Semitic. What it shows is that even Jung still had a shadow that needed to be worked on. We're all beings in progress, trying to find our way the best we know how in the in-between. trying our best to live a life that is fulfilling and whole. How each of us grapples with that is individual, and yet what I know for sure is that when I find a paradox in my life, I can be sure that there's some opportunity there waiting for me to learn from it. I need paradox. Without depression and anger and sadness, I could not have happiness. The behaviorist Carl Rogers, who ironically disagreed with Jung on a great many things, put it that the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, it is then I can change. What if we need to find the paradoxes that are hidden within us, the ambiguity, those in-between and liminal places, and find ways of learning what they're trying to teach us, finding new ways of being, of seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, and yes, even tasting in different ways. Once again, I'm not advocating that you completely make yourself into a different person. I think that would be the wrong-headed play as well. But what if there's lessons of the things that we've learned to hide from the world? What if there's grace to be found in the places that we think are most broken and most don't deserve to be seen? May we find new ways to see ourselves in the world and embrace the paradoxes that we encounter in our lives. And may we find within the wholeness that calls us to see that maybe there's more in the in-between spaces than just hallways leading to other places, if within them all. Maybe so. Our closing hymn is number 1074, and the Till hymn will turn the world around.
Fire, living in the fire, go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water, go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain, go back to the mountain, turn the world around. So is life. So is life.
Wow, that was fun. It reminds me that I'm glad we're not on Zoom all the time. But it's still fun to revisit. Anyway, please join me in extinguishing our chalice. You will find the words in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of unity, or the fire of commitment. These we carry on our hearts until we are together again. Please be our guest today after the service for our coffee hour here in the sanctuary. This is an opportunity to chat with people about the service and just how their week went. If you're not signed up for our email list, please make sure to do so to receive updates about ways to connect. You can find information on signing up at our website, auuf.org/subscribe. I invite anyone with a spoken announcement to come forward at this time.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm chair of Sunday Services Committee, so our responsibility is to help organize the services when Reverend Chris isn't here. You're welcome to come join. If you want to help us plan the lay-led services, we could use all the help and talent that we can get. 11:30 meeting today. Thank you.
I missed one person at our dinner party. Masha was also there. I don't know how to miss that. I guess because there's a lot of people and I'm not used to dining with lots of people. Anyway, I also have another announcement. I have two flyers here. One has a membership card in it. This is for the Auburn Arts Association, and you can read up what we've been doing and what we need to keep doing if you'd like to keep arts in the city of Auburn. Stick over here. And what else? Please now join us for our Sun benediction for
Go forth into the world in peace and peace. Be of good courage, hold fast that which is good. Go forth into the world in peace, in peace. Love all people, rejoicing in the power of God's Spirit. Go in peace.
I'm going to tell Martha when she gets back we didn't know what to do with the benediction without her here to start us. Our benediction today is from Michael A. Schuler. Cherish your doubts, for doubt is the servant of truth. Question your convictions, for beliefs too tightly held strangle the mind in its natural wisdom. Suspect all certitudes, for the world whirls on, nothing abides. Yet in our inner rooms, full of doubt, inquiry, suspicion, let a corner be reserved for trust. For without trust, there is no space for communities to gather or for friendships to be forged. Indeed, this is the small corner where we are connected and reconnect with each other. Amen. Blessed be, and go in peace.